be done only by a senior officer, and the most senior person was the 4-star general, the former General Sarath Fonseka. So any junior officer cannot take act as a commander above.
No, in fact, he does cite it. You can have a junior officer arresting a senior officer in the event of violence, and surely this was disruption, violence, I mean what the man had been up to.
A quarrel and a display and public order. Yes.
So there's that point.
So
but the second point, you can also delegate, because he says this wasn't violence. I mean, what else was the man up to? But basically, the fact that you can delegate is very clearly there, and there is someone above the Army Commander or the Chief of Defence Staff with the Commander-in-Chief. That's what the word Commander-in-Chief means. So using the word that there's no one in command of a commander is not a very sensible use of language. So I think on the whole, you know, if we are going to spend too much time on Sarath Silva, given his deep interest in this whole question, I suspect that we will lose sight of the reality, which is that this gentleman is charged with real offences. The Army Act is very clear about corruption, very clear. And how else do you charge a man who has been corrupt in terms of his duties in the army, except in terms of the Army Act? I mean, I think it's been absolutely fascinating that two newspapers which were basically pro-Sarath Fonseka in the presidential, the leader declared that they had decided to support him. The Sunday Times, although as always they were more circumspect, you know, they're obviously a pro-UNP paper, they're now coming out into the open a bit more, given of course that the owner's son is claims that he's the inheritor of all traditions in the UNP, the bad as well as the good. So you have this rather funny situation where last Sunday, just as Sarath Silva was firing off in a couple of papers, the leader in an editorial was almost scathing about what it seemed to suggest was Sarath Fonseka's corruption. And the Times, which is less direct, had this wonderful article highlighting all the High Corp business. So it's almost as though the former coalition is doing its best to show the man is a rogue. Well, the government papers didn't have this.
So why do you think the dynamics have changed, Professor? Now you were quoting the leader article and also the Times. What is the reason behind this, according to your analysis?
Well, I think it's fairly obvious. It also relates to something that a BBC reporter asked me, not someone in Sri Lanka. He said, look, was it really true that Sarath Fonseka was trying to assassinate the president and the rest? And I said, I don't know, but I do know that there are genuine, sincere beliefs that he was going to do this and that he was a man of violence who would have stood at nothing. Whether that is the case, I don't know, but it's certainly a sincere belief. And this BBC guy said to me, oh, I don't think the Rajapaksas need have worried because he would have defeated them if he won. The person who should really have been frightened would have been Ranil. You know, their belief was that Sarath Fonseka, had he been elected president, God forbid, would have actually had to get rid of the potential rival. Now, I don't know whether the BBC was exaggerating as they sometimes do, but of course the very interesting fact, I think, is that clearly from the point of view of the UNP, this man is dangerous. You know, I think they've realized that there's charges of corruption that seem accurate, you know, all that money found in his account and so on. It must worry them, because of course, you know, one point everyone has made about Ranil Wickremesinghe at least is he's not corrupt. You know, I don't suppose you can speak for the party as a whole. And for him to have been associated with this must be pretty galling. But of course, in a very practical way, any vote for Sarath Fonseka is a vote away from the UNP. With this wonderful spectacle of, you know, we assume Ranil Wickremesinghe will be elected, but the great struggle from the anti-government forces to come second is Sarath Fonseka versus Rosie Senanayake. It's a wonderful contest.
So, are you meaning to say the opinion that former general is being detained and arrested is also to stop him from running for the elections is not a concern for the government?
Complete nonsense as far as the government is concerned. This little warfare between these two parties, especially on this mad election system where, you know, everyone wants to outdo the other people in terms of preferences, is a godsend. That's why the government made crystal clear that he could contest. They facilitated, you know, signing of nomination papers and all that. Just as with regard to the election petition, you know, there were people who said they were trying to stop him filing an election petition. Of course the government wanted an election petition, because when the petition came out, it made it very clear that all the wilder charges that election commissioner was under arrest, that computer fraud was done, turn out to be cloud cuckoo land. And if you look at the election petition now, it actually is a bit of a damp squib. So I think from the government's point of view, Sarath Fonseka is in dynamite. If he's dynamite, he's going to sort of dynamite poor Ranil. So I think that's an internal warfare that's actually quite amusing. And I put my money on Rose Senaka. Much more fun than Sarath Fonseka.
And also, Professor, now you were also the former Secretary of the Disaster Management and Human Rights Ministry. So when you look at it from a human rights perspective, again we know that Article 13, 1 and 2 of our Constitution protects and safeguard the right to life and liberty and security, and especially against arbitrary detention and arrest. And this is exactly the same concerns voiced in the Human Declaration and also the ICCPR in Article 9. So is there any threat to the person's freedom and security and can you call this arbitrary arrest? I'm actually, maybe you addressed
it's not arbitrary. I mean, for heaven's sake, if a man is arrested with certain lines read out to him, and if he's now going to be charged, I wouldn't call it arbitrary at all. And we know perfectly well that in many cases, collecting evidence and bringing forward a trial takes some time. He's actually been remarkably quick. The man is being charged within just about a month. And of course, I think it's been brilliant the way they actually found that money. I mean, who would have thought of concealing all your massive ill-gotten gains in the bank vault of your son-in-law's mother? The poor lady, I mean, she may not have known what it was all about. I think full marks to the people who have investigated this, because it really is very worrying. And I continue to be absolutely startled about that money. I don't think that's commissions, because commissions are not paid in cash. So there's deep worry about what's going on. You've got the commissions on the one hand, you have this massive amount of money on the other. I mean, this is not something that Sri Lankans can be complacent about.
So on that note, Professor, we will also look at another area that is basically worrying us, especially with respect to the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, because he has on the letter dated on March 2nd, he has actually sent to His Excellency the President and said that they're thinking of a probe by the United Nations on issues of accountability with respect to war crimes. So what are your comments on it, and what are your
Well, I think I feel rather sorry for Ban Ki-moon. He's a sweet gentleman. He does occasionally get bullied by people, and although he tries very hard and to do his best to resist, people like David Miliband are dreadful. They needle at you. I do remember about a year and a half ago, in one of the first notes that Ban Ki-moon said about this, he referred to the possibility of war crimes. And I remember pointing out at the time that this was inappropriate, that this was totally based on ignorance. The Sri Lankan forces have, I would say, the best record in the world of anyone fighting against terrorism. I don't say it's perfect, because there always is collateral damage, but it was much better than anything else. And Ban Ki-moon was absolutely talking nonsense a year and a half ago when he talked about war crimes. Now, of course, in the last 6 months of the war, things got worse, and he wanted issues of accountability. And of course, Sarath Fonseka, by first declaring that he took a decision to shoot people in white flags and then saying, no, he didn't do this. The man just changed his mind in terms of which particular constituency he was trying to attract. That sort of statement could make people feel that there is a case to look into things. And Ban Ki-moon told the President, and said, of course we'll look into things if you tell us what to look into. We're not going to set up tribunals to look for evidence, like that mad Channel 4 video, where they still can't tell us where it happened, when it happened. How the hell can we go around looking for things that no one knows? But we have pledged ourselves any concrete allegation, and nothing concrete has emerged so far. All that we've had is, the US State Department report, and that was reasonably civilized, because it said, we've heard these, we're not saying they're true, but could you look into that? And they gave date and time. And the government said, we'll look into them. In fact, I myself, before this came out, and this is what irritates me, I mean, they're not concerned about human rights the way we are. I, as Secretary of the Peace Secretariat, monitored any allegation on TamilNet, and I used to ask the forces for explanations. The ones I got seemed to me to indicate that certainly there was never deliberate targeting of civilians. 428 airstrikes up to December, and only 28 of them did Tamil Net claim that civilians died. 22 of them, only 1 or 2. So